But yeah, the flight training took a while, and I ended up finishing it up my first fall semester, freshman year of college, where I was able to finish up the last of my cross country requirement, get my sign off, and it was kind of pretty cool. And with my check ride, I had the DME designated examiner. He used to work for my uncle's airline, so as one of the pilots. So it was kind of pretty cool. Like he was like, "You're not related to Terry, are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, I used to work for him." And and it's like, "Oh, that was kind of cool." So it was nice to have that connection.
Small world aviation
Oh yeah.
thing.
We mention this
Oh, definitely.
every single episode. We warn people
It is.
that it's a very small industry, and you never know when you're going to come across someone. So always be kind to each other, treat each other with respect, because look at your perfect situation here. Your DE was a former employee of your father. Now, I assume everything went very well and that he didn't have any like hang-ups against
No pink slips.
No, not at all. I mean, there was a couple moments during that check ride. I remember, I think it was like he was asking for a maneuver, and I remember getting slightly flustered, but I took a moment to collect myself and was able to continue everything. That whole check ride was just a blur in my memory. I mean, I remember flying and doing everything, but there was I remember there was a few moments I got flustered, and I can't pinpoint it in my head because it was just like, I was so excited and terrified at the same time. I can't believe I'm doing this. And then ultimately I walked out, with my pilot license. So it's just, and I think that's the biggest thing is I've even now at Sandpiper, when I go back for recurrent, there's always something to learn from, even if it's just a recurrent event. And I think that's always a good thing to have. So,
yeah. I wanted to back up a moment and just ask you. You said something that you and I flew together. You and I flew together at Sandpiper before I left. I remember, the whole experience was very positive, and I was so very impressed back then when you were explaining to me how your medical worked, because I never flew up until that point with someone who had partial hearing loss. I always believed that was something that would disqualify you, and I always found it so intriguing when you explained to me how it could be corrected with the hearing aids, and it's just like another restriction to your license, like having glasses. And you mentioned it earlier in your story here, and I just wanted to kind of get into that just a little bit so that our listeners out there, and I can't tell you how many times that I have answered questions to young people or young aviators that are interested in aviation but believe that they couldn't pass a medical exam because they thought they had to have 20/20 or you can't be a pilot, or they had to have perfect hearing, or they had to have, they couldn't be colorblind. And the truth is that there are so many details that you can get around some of these previously thought to be, grounding items. So you mentioned that as long as it can be corrected with your hearing aids, it's just another thing on your medical that you have to have with you when you fly, like glasses. Is it just that simple, or is there a little bit more to it than that?
It's pretty much that simple, but the AMEs that I do go to now, they are aware of it, and I had a AME for a while where he did not list that on there, even though he was aware of it. It was just that because his criteria, every AME has a slightly different criteria how they look at certain things, but obviously they've fallen well within the FAA guideline that is issued for the first class or respected class medical that they're issuing. Most of them will be like, they'll have a conversation in the room, and it's like, they'll just ask me to take my hearing aid out. Can you hear me here? What part? Because when we're in interpersonal space, like, okay, let's 3 feet apart, and I respond well to mid to deep voice, deep range. Like I could hear that. For most guys, I can hear and talk fairly well. Like high pitched voice, I do have a moderate loss where it's like it has to be louder before I would hear that. And
see, that's what I tell my wife, but she never listens to me. Sorry, go ahead.
It's all good. So yeah, so a lot of them would just, they'll just kind of I remember one time they did like the snapping test. Like, can you hear this? He would snap his finger. Walk around the room as he was kind of asking me other questions. It's like, can you hear this? Can you hear this? And then, no big deal. So, and the other thing is like with the hearing aids nowadays, like you can get them adjusted. So it's like adjusted. Like my hearing loss is more from permanent nerve damage. Now we never figured out what exactly caused that for me, and the best guess that we kind of figured out is that I had ear infections when I was little, and that could have been a possible factor. I never let it stop bothering me. Obviously, I felt like electronics and water don't mix, but it didn't stop me from being a lifeguard, and I never had a situation where I had to compromise that. But they come out so quick and easy. Just like as you pull your earbuds out.
Right.
Sorry. So it's just like it's quick and easy, not a big deal. And at the end of the day, if I need to save somebody when I was lifeguarding, it's just like I'm going to save them first. I'll worry about myself later. So
Nice.
fortunately, I never had to put that to the test. But yeah, most of it's pretty simple. And then at the end of the day, like as I educated my AMEs, and most of my AMEs that I've been working with, they're pilots themselves. So that helps makes a better relationship. And at the end of the day, it's like I carry spare batteries with me. Like as you're, that's the only problem I have with these is that the battery sometimes can die at the most inconvenient time. So the batteries just swap in and out. But then it's like as we all know, for those of us with glasses, like you must carry a spare set of lenses. What is the last current prescription or just another set of contacts? So it's like the batteries are kind of your backup. And lastly, but least, just like if God forbid, I thought I had spare batteries and they were all out, which hasn't happened, I just simply can turn the volume up on the audio panel. So that's my last resort. I mean, so I have that option of being able to still clearly communicate with my crew members, front and back. So,
and
awesome.
So I guess
it's for sharing that. That's great.
So yeah, I mean, in college, I remember one of my buddies. He's working now as a corporate pilot. He was colorblind. Didn't stop him. And then reading through history, I'm big into World War II history, but there was an English pilot who lost both of his legs as an amputee, and he, prior to the war and during the war, he was a very successful fighter pilot for the British. So if you ever look up the name Douglas Bader, he was a double amputee. And so it's like stories like that is, there are pilots out there who can fly. And I remember
successful.
Yeah, there was an article that I remember seeing it was about maybe a year or two ago about a gentleman it was a European airline. He had a malfunction with his prosthetic arm. It got stuck to the thrust lever and something like, they were able to still fly, but the idea that there are pilots out there with prosthetics safely flying people around. And so
yeah,
I definitely encourage everybody. I have gotten questioned by people at the local fly-in when I'm helping out there, like, what can we do for alternate, possibly making controls accessible for someone, who is, say, they lost use of their lower extremities, so it's just like aviation is working on making that happen. And I believe there are some independent, people out there who have made it successful, like for those that can't fly. I mean, I think there's the one girl, Jessica Hines, she doesn't have many arms. She flies with her feet. I think that's the right name. I could be wrong. I remember her first name is Jessica, though. So it's definitely aviation is like, I think it still can be an accessible field for all those who wants to partake.
Yeah, and
That's
don't
cool.
let any kind of current perceived disability that you might think will disqualify you as a pilot, discourage you from getting the facts, going to your local AME, asking. We have a family friend, and the son is 15 years old, and he's starting to take private pilot license lessons. And so they know I'm a pilot, so they're asking me a lot of questions. And it turns out that he had a minor medical issue, and they're like, "Well, is this going to disqualify him? What it's going to crush his dream? He really wants to get his private pilot license." And I told her, his mom, the same thing that we're talking about now. Don't let that discourage you. Find out the facts. Find out if it's something that is going to be an issue, or it could easily you'll get around it just by jumping through a couple more hoops that the others might not have to. So thank you for sharing that with us. I really do appreciate it. You've shed some light to this question that is going around the GA community constantly since I started 20 years ago.
And
What qualifies you? What doesn't qualify you? What if I lose my medical? So knowing that you could make it, look at you, you're a captain at a regional airline and you've had really no issues.
And actually, while finishing up, the last two things I want to put out is AOPA has really good medical support. So, like, if you have something questioning medical, like that, you can reach out to AOPA, and they would answer that before you put yourself in jeopardy before going to an AME or a regular physician. That was the big thing. And then, as you said, I was the first pilot to fly that you flew with that had hearing aids, and like I said, but I remember meeting another gentleman at Sandpiper. He's over at a different company now, but Justin, was born completely deaf, and he had the cochlear implant, and so it's like I was really impressed with him. It's just like to see him successful, being a captain with us at Sandpiper, and so it was definitely that really impressed me, and just like it was something like knowing that I'm not the only one out there like that, and I know I'm definitely not. I do see several of my peers, obviously with hearing aids, that usually they're a lot older, in their 50s, well easily, and at that point it's kind of understandable. But for younger, when you're growing up with it, I tell people don't be discouraged. So
yeah, I met Justin a few times. We've actually hung out in Chicago. I've never
okay.
met him personally, but yeah, I believe he's the United States' first pilot to receive a first class medical with cochlear implants. I thought that was very impressive that he was able to accomplish that. So yeah, there are plenty of other pilots out there. I've flown with others since then, and exactly what you said. Usually they're much older, captains that are in their late part of their careers, and obviously because of age or whatever, or maybe previous equipment that they flew in the military is very loud, and of course, that's acceptable hearing loss over time because you're in that environment. But, let's get back to your journey. So
That's fun.
you got your GA flying instruction. You started it in high school, carried your way through, worked your way through it, which is very just wonderful to hear.